Hi, everyone. Welcome for those who are able to join us. And we're about 1 minute early, but we are on. And as I shared, we are joined by David Rowe. I've known Dave since our seminary days, and it's good to have you. And David and Jackie are currently in Taiwan, and they've been serving overseas for many, many years now. Actually, how many years?
We left in 20 years ago, but we came back. So total is 14, 15 years, but we came back for 6 years.
Yes. So I remember when Dave first came to Gordon-Conwell, the seminary that we were at. My friends and I, there were two other guys. We were in a prayer chapel, and he was new. He came. We were praying. It was September, I believe, and he said, "Like, oh, we introduced ourselves," and Dave said, "Oh yeah, my name is David Rowe. I actually was at Trinity, but I'm coming here because my girlfriend is at Gordon College, and I'm going to be gone right after the semester. So I actually don't care about any of you. I just want to be near my girlfriend." That's an exaggeration, but not so much of an exaggeration. It's actually pretty close. Is that not right? Do you remember that?
My mindset was I was just going to be here for 1 year and I'll be gone. Yeah, I think that was.
But the funny thing is, Dave ended up staying longer than all of us in the Boston area. I think that's true. Out of our group of friends at Gordon-Conwell, you stayed the longest. In fact, you still own a home there in the Boston area, and you're the director of the Christy Wilson. You still are, right? The Christy Wilson Center for Missions.
As of July, no longer, but it's slowly coming to an end.
Oh, really? Okay. Do you mind sharing a little bit about where you're at now? What are things going? What's happening?
So we left. Okay, so just quickly, after seminary, Gordon-Conwell, I then pastored at a Chinese church, the English congregation in Lexington, Massachusetts. And then after pastoring for 4 years, then the church, we joined OMF as a mission agency, and we went to China. So in the year 2001, our family with 2 young kids were in China for about close to 9+ years. And then we came back 2010. And then in the US, that's when I started at Gordon-Conwell, became the director of the Christy Wilson Center for World Missions at the seminary. And then, but after a few years in Boston, we then felt called back to the mission field in Asia. So we moved to Taiwan 4 years ago. And so now we're in Taichung, Taiwan, and we've been here about 4 years.
And you're also working with Lausanne, aren't you?
Right. So one of I wear many hats, but one of my hats.
What are all the hats?
Well, so I am first, I think, a Christian.
Then, are you sure about that?
Yeah. And then, one hat I wear, of course, is I am an OMF missionary. So I am a full member sent by OMF. OMF was started by Hudson Taylor 150+ years ago. Used to be called China Inland Mission. And so that's the mission agency I'm with. Now, the hat that I wear in Asia is the Lausanne movement was started by Billy Graham and John Stott, but it really is bringing Christian leaders together to shape the future of the mission movement coming out of the evangelical churches. So we have meetings and consultations, bringing leaders together. So, for example, there's in 1974, there's a Lausanne Covenant that John Stott and some theologians wrote, but that became sort of the mission document that most mission agencies use as a statement of faith for it. So anyway, so I'm the regional director for the Lausanne movement in East Asia. And it's because of my time in China. So I bring together leaders in China, in Korea. I'm in Taiwan here, Hong Kong, and Mongolia and Japan. So we come together bringing leaders together for meetings to shape the future of the mission movement.
A couple of quick updates. One is, do you mind sharing a little bit about how things are at regarding the coronavirus in Taiwan? Taiwan is considered to be on the forefront of at least really battling the virus compared to a lot of the other countries in the world. In fact, you could say it's like next to Korea. It's like next to each other in terms of its battling of the virus. How are things there?
Yeah, actually, it's even better than Korea. Partly, actually, there's only maybe 6 or 7 deaths total, and no new cases in the last, at least no local new cases. There's a lot of some foreigners coming in, visiting, and then it starts some kind. But then no new cases for the last month at least, if not more. So pretty safe. Of course, everyone's social distancing and wearing masks. That all helps. By the way, one reason why I think it is that everyone wears masks, even though everyone's just playing it safe. It's so different. When I see the news in the U.S., everyone's like protesting, like we don't need to wear. I mean, in Taiwan, it's the safest place, and everyone still is wearing masks, except for sometimes me and Jackie, we kind of we're a little more people looking at you guys not wearing masks. Anyway, that's just that. I think that's part of the Chinese, the Asian culture, being a little more sensitive to just we want to be considerate of others. So we'll wear masks for the sake of you instead of just for the sake of me, kind of thing. It's not you're not wearing masks to protect yourself. Although you're protecting yourself, you're saying I'm wearing it so that I won't cough in front of that kind of a feeling. Anyway, so Taiwan's been doing a great job. Yeah.
That's great to hear.
The kids go to school. They have to wear masks at school. The
restaurants are open.
Everything's open. Everything's open. There's not one thing closed. And even
go
the
to church.
night markets, with thousands of people. So we go in there's thousands of people walking around. Of course, they're all wearing. Wow. They always have these wear masks, and some. I would say maybe 3/4 of the people wear masks at the night market. And Jackie and I are the quarter that don't. But anyway, so that's just how it is.
And the Taiwanese night markets, oh, seriously. But the Taiwanese night markets, they're famous. They are world famous. So, I mean, that's where it all began, right? Well, Taiwan, maybe Japan.
The wet markets in China.
No, I mean,
you're talking about.
No. I don't mean the coronavirus. I mean just the night market. Where you have food and you.
I'm sure the night markets everywhere, but Taiwan is known for its night markets ever since. I grew up as a missionary in Taiwan. They've always had night markets even back then. So it was. So it's part of the tradition of Taiwan. Yeah.
So. But when I think about Dave and I look at your hair, Dave, I think, wow, life has gone fast, right?
Yeah, I can't believe.
Can you imagine just how quickly time has gone, and especially I think for all of us, maybe you could share a little bit about what it was like for you in doing ministry, being in seminary during those days, and then how it is today, like in terms of what are some of the thoughts that you had, the dreams that you had back then, and then how does it look today in terms of what it means to be in leadership context in the church, being able to see the church broadly, especially in Asia, because I think you have a lot of insight into the church in Asia in particular, but I would say broadly as well. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, when we were seminary students, it was a different world even back then. But we were, we loved the Lord. We were serving in the churches. We really wanted to make a difference. We we went into ministry with an all-out heart to serve the God, and God sent us to all different areas. And we, of course, I was all into missions even back then. Even though
Yes.
I went into pastor ministry, I think you guys all knew I was heading to China, even though I was a pastor for a season. I would never wanted to have Sam's job. I mean, being a pastor for one church for 20 years is torture for me.
Maybe it's torture for a lot of people, not just you.
So I think
it's a blessing.
No, actually, okay. So I've been involved in pastorate ministry, and I love the pastorate because I saw people grow. I mean, when you're in a pastorate ministry, you see people grow like an inch after a year. I'm just very little, but you can preach 50 messages that year, and people still, they grow a little, but they grow. Right? You go to the mission field, and of course, it's not easy. I just have to say, missions is it's harder than the pastorate in many ways. Okay. But it's easier in other ways as well. But in one way that it's easier is that often, and not always, I have to say, often you get to see fruit in a different way. You can see people, come to faith more often because you're in a pioneering situation. You get to see spiritual growth, like go from zero, like no faith, to like super duper faith in such a short time, surpassing, something that could take place, would spend 30 years in the US. You can see something take place in 1 year. So sometimes you get to see that, and that kind of excitement to be able to see how spiritual fruit can grow in certain areas is something of value that I've learned, yeah, definitely in a different cultural context, a different, you have a lot more stress for the family, for the kids, for the marriage, for the language. It's not easy. And the conflicts that you experience at church, which is, every church, every pastor goes through, you can multiply that by 100 on the mission field, if not 1,000. I mean, it's a different level of, it's very messy, very, very messy. That's some of the challenges, but the messiness is actually what also somehow, that's how spiritual activity is very alive sometimes during the messiest of times. That's how I mean, I don't even know what the question is, but I'm just kind of rambling here.
Yeah. What about, I mean, maybe you could give a little bit of a update on the church in China. Really, they have been through a lot for many years, right? It's not just, but of late, it definitely has its, I'm assuming, these peaks and valleys from the Cultural Revolution to present. And there's just a lot of peaks and valleys in terms of, especially in terms of governmental pressures. And, how can we pray for the church? What do you feel like is the pulse of the church? How are they handling or dealing with just the current status of things?
Right. So starting from 2018, a new religious regulation came out, and pretty much it's pretty much anything that is related to the house church is illegal now. I mean, it was always been illegal, but the government sort of usually just close one. They say they close one eye, they open one eye. They just kind of let you exist. They'll pressure you, but they won't. It's very hard for them to do something legally. So ever since the last 2 years, churches all across China have been under attack. And this is the official church as well as the house church, which is unofficial, illegal churches. So the church, one of my good friends, Pastor Ezra Jin, he sort of had a church of about 1,500, a house church in Beijing, the largest house church in Beijing, had about 5 services, rented space. And he started in 2007 and was able to grow to now a year ago, and no problem. And then the government came in and said, we want to install 24 cameras. And then he said no, and then they put down the church. And so so all across China, you see these churches all being attacked. Now, when a church is under attack, it doesn't mean that the Christians no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
The Christians just find other ways to meet. Because once you're a Christian in China, you're pretty much always a Christian. It's not like the U.S. where you don't sometimes can't tell. If there's a snowstorm, you don't know if there, you don't.
Yeah.
In China, it's like
It's
once a
just,
Christian, you're always a Christian kind of thing.
yes.
And so they just say, okay, if you can't meet in larger groups, you meet in smaller groups. You just meet in homes, or you meet in cafes. So they'll figure it out. And their mentality is more like, arrest me if you have to, put me in jail if you have to, but this is just who I am. I'm going to stand firm in my faith. But that's sort of the situation. Well, although the coronavirus has been has hit hard, in China economically, of course, the world, many deaths and so on. But what it's done is very interesting. It's actually resulted in a revival for the church in China. And what's happened is, because of the coronavirus, the government let the Chinese, all around millions of Chinese, download Zoom, which is what we're using right now.
Yes.
In the past, they actually stopped in 2019, and so when the laws came down, they actually cut off Zoom.
Okay.
But because of the coronavirus, the government said, well, we don't want people to, meet outside, so you guys can meet in Zoom. So what happened is now thousands of people can go online and meet like we're doing right now.
Okay.
And so that's what caused a momentum for churches to meet online. And so there's prayer meetings all day. There's mission meetings, and 1,000 pastors every week gather together to talk about missions. That could have never happened during a year or two ago, or even the last 20 years. In fact, the last 60 years couldn't have never. In fact, never happened because of Zoom wasn't around. But anyways, the point is, there is a momentum because of the ability to meet online, and then it's a revival of prayer. Actually, prayer is the thing that's causing the churches to grow. So I see it as almost God preparing the Chinese church for missions, allowing for the coronavirus to take place, allowing the churches to come together to be revived. Because in the end, you got to have the spiritual strength to be engaged in missions. If you don't have that spiritual strength, preaching it can only go so far. You really have to have that spiritual strength, and that's what's taking place now in China.
That's pretty awesome. That is amazing. I'm assuming there is still a crackdown, though, in the midst of this all, or an attempted. You must know a number of people who have been arrested, who have been imprisoned, come out, and after you hear their story do you find that, what is their faith like?
Well, I'll just share with you my best friend, who I've known, who is the pastor of the church that we attended when we were in Beijing, called Shawang Church. If you ever have a chance, you can Google it, but it hasn't been in the news for a while because they've been under attack. They got attacked in 2011 and in April. And so my best friend, his name is Tianming. You can pray for him, but he's been under house arrest ever since April of 2011.
Wow.
So that means it's
like coronavirus. It's like shelter in place for
pretty much
9 years.
Yeah, he has 3 security guards with beds sleeping right outside his door. And they have rotations of, I think 3 rotations of that. And so he is just in his home for the last 9 years. Now his wife can go out and buy, groceries, and actually for a while he was able to visit. People were able to come. Actually, Jackie, my wife, somehow sneaked in when the guards were playing ping pong downstairs. And I was able to meet him because they're not, legally not supposed to let anyone visit. But this is how it is in China. They'll just pretend they didn't see it. And so when. So that's Tianming, Pastor Tianming, in my opinion, though, is one of the, because I've met a lot of Christian leaders in the West as well as in Asia, and my job actually is just to engage with leaders, pastors, and so on. But he is definitely, in my opinion, one of the most spiritual godly leaders that I've met. He sees things really a different level of insights, and he's got his bags already packed. Any day, if he's going to be sent to prison, he's ready for it, and he has tremendous peace throughout this whole process. So, he's just a person who, so he actually wrote this book called Shan Shang Zhi Cheng. For those who are Chinese, City on a Hill. But pretty much when it's from Matthew 5. We could be a city on a hill, light into the world. We shouldn't be hidden. Under. So his whole model as a urban church was, because the house church was underground. He said we need to still, even though we're illegal, we need to come and have a public witness we need to show to the world, even though we're getting attacked, that we are Christians. And so that's why he had a movement of churches from the house beginning to go into public spheres and renting space in the offices and so on. So impacted all of China. Millions of house churches and house church Christians in China were impacted by him. But that's his whole purpose, was to prepare the church. One day you have to enter into society, impact society. And whenever the church does that, you're going to get persecution. That's why, remember when Peter and they're preaching the gospel, and also the Sanhedrin and the Jews. So wait a minute, you're impacting, and so then they arrested them. So what happens is, once you have a public presence, you're going to get attacked.
Yes.
And
yes.
His whole point is the churches needs to actually go out and, in some sense, welcome that attack, because that's part of the process of the gospel getting spread out. In fact, the early church, Polycarp and all the martyrs, their testimony won the Roman world because of them being persecuted, standing firm, in the Colosseums, getting eaten by lions, right? That in itself was the witness. They didn't have to preach the gospel. Their death and staying firm, persecution of that witness, is what caused the Roman Empire. So wait a minute, these guys are different. There's something about this gospel. Why are we sending people to the lions? This is cruel. This is not humane, right? And so it just changed the Roman society at the time, when you stand firm during persecution. So what persecution does is actually it highlights the gospel. And you cannot see it in the U.S. because when you don't have persecution, the gospel just gets mixed with every other good thing, with the YMCA and with all the other things that are But what persecution does in China is it really it almost shines light into what the gospel is, and that's why I think why the gospel is really spreading fast in China.
Oh, that's great. Do you you had mentioned the fact that from China there are people actually going out of China to other parts of the world sharing the gospel, right? That, in other words, there are missionaries who are now China's ascending church, not just the receiving church when it comes to missions. What does that look like? I mean, that's not easy you don't see that often, even from open societies, right? So you have a closed society and they're actually sending people. That in of itself must be a great challenge. And yet they're doing it.
So that's the main difference. So, when I get together with these house church leaders, like I said, I told you 1,000 pastors meet at least weekly. And you would think, okay, imagine if you got Tim Keller, Rick Warren, Andy Stanley, get 1,000 of the top pastors in North America, together. What would they talk about? Okay. What would be their prayer topic? Or what would, of course, if it were Tim Keller, you get, he would talk possibly about gospel-centered ministry. If you're talking to Rick Warren, it'd be seeker-sensitive church, whatever, right? Yeah, they would have their own kind of things, but try to bring them all together, right, to talk about one thing. Well, interesting thing is, for China, when they get together, their main topic, of course, they talk about church planting, talk about discipleship, talk about seminary education, talk about, holiness and all the issues of persecution, whatever. Their main thing is mission sending. How can we send out our young people to the hardest areas. And what they feel like is God gave them a vision to send to, because of persecution, the Chinese church is able to weather the storm. We have this sort of sacrificial spirit. You know, we can handle the more difficult tasks. So I was interviewing two pastors for my PhD on this, and they said, God's given us the hard. They said, this is our impression. We feel like the rest of the world is pretty easy. I mean, it's free, and we'll let the American church, handle the easier stuff. But God's given us the burden for the harder stuff, which is the Middle East. This is back to Jerusalem, I think. And so we're able to weather a difficult storm. So we're going to send our people primarily heading back toward Jerusalem, that direction, to the Middle East, and it's going to cost a lot of lives. They sense it's not going to be an easy path, and so their sense is we want to prepare the next generation to sacrifice themselves in order to go to the harshest places where the gospel hasn't been reached. And so I think that's something that I've seen in the Chinese church that really has. I think when the pastors catch it, then it just trickles down to the average person. Now, it's not that every church is like that, okay? And it's not even that the average person's that way, but at least I know the pastors are thinking that way. And that's something that I see maybe 10, 20 years from now, it really is going to be like the Korean church in the last 30 years, sending out 1,000 missionaries. In about 20, 30 years, we'll see a similar momentum from these churches. So I'll give you a real example. The church that my Shawang church has got about maybe it used to be 1,000 members, but after it's been attacked all the years, it's probably there's about 300 or 400 Marines left in this church.
Okay.
I mean, they're you saw the movie 300, right? And they're like those 300 who's dropping like 100,000 of Persians coming in. Okay, there's about 300 Marines, right? While the pastor is still in house arrest, they are sent out missionaries to Africa. 2 missionaries already been sent to Africa, and they have some other missionaries in other places. But they are in the senior pastor, right? After planting this church, starting this church, after 20 years of pastoral ministry, last year stepped down from the pastorate to go, even though he can't leave his home, he's full-time in mission mobilization. Because God has given him a vision to focus the next 20 years of his life to raise up missionaries to be sent out. And this is not just for, look, Pastor Tianming, I'll just give you an analogy. Pastor Tianming is kind of like, if you were to think, who's the most influential, Sam, let me ask you, if you were to say, who's the most influential pastor in North America?
Probably Tim Keller.
Okay, let's say he is the Tim Keller of China. So imagine if Tim Keller, after, Tim Keller stepped down from Redeemer Church, what did he do for the next 20 years? I think he's still into, gospel-centered church planting, which actually, I brought Tianming and 20 house church pastors to New York for 1 month of church planting training with Tim Keller. So we spent every day with him. I know Tim pretty well, right? Okay, so imagine if Tim Keller, after he stepped down from Redeemer Church, decided to spend the next 20 years of raising up 20,000 young people from North America to go into the Middle East as his primary objective. Imagine that impacting all the thousands of churches in North America, right? And getting thousands of, okay, that's the kind of impact that this kind of pastor has. Of course, the fact that he's being under house arrest and so on adds to the credibility of that. And it shows you what's happening in China. God is doing something in China. Is something on a supernatural level. I really believe there's God's preparing the church in China for this, because what will happen is the church in China will then give an example to the rest of the churches all across the world, saying, even if you're in the Middle East under persecution, you can still be involved in missions. And even more so if you're in a region which is free, there's no excuse
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
America and Europe and so on. That if a church was still under attack where the pastor can't even leave his room, his house, can still be engaged in mission and make that his primary call.
Mm-hmm.
That I think would be the message that the Chinese church has for the rest of the world.
Oh man, that is convicting. It's hard to hear because it's convicting, it's so true. What do you think about missions in America? I mean, I do think when we were in seminary, there was a very different picture of what missions look like. We trained under a professor by the name of Christy Wilson, who was formerly a missionary to Afghanistan for about 25 years, eventually was expelled from Afghanistan. And, he would always, one of the most godly men we knew, right? Really loved the Lord deeply. And, but you don't really see that type of missiology anymore. That perception of sort of the way you're describing missions from the Chinese context. It's really shifted in the way that missions is thought of, even like student missions movements such as Urbana, very different focus than what Urbana used to look like. Similarly to a lot of the missions agencies are very different in its focus. I just was curious what you think about that. What are your thoughts about missions in general from America, within the West?
PhD, and I can spend all day talking about it. Keep it real short here. The missional church, which is what now has been the description of, in the past, there's the theology, this is called Missio Dei, the mission of God, okay? It actually is started by Karl Barth, but it was a liberal theology that now has come into the evangelical church, saying that in the past, the church was sending out missionaries, like the J. Christy Wilson days, the US was sending missionaries, and we still do. We send missionaries to the world. But in general, there's a guy named David Bosch, and he wrote a book called Transform Missions. And that's sort of like the encyclopedia for missions. But what he's trying to say is, and this is what most every missiologist that you probably will read or hear about it say is, that's part of the past. Because that was during the Western Christendom era of colonialism and imperialism. And now we're no longer imperialists, we're no longer colonialists. So we don't need to send missionaries in the world because the world now has Christians all around the world. So let them do the missionary work. And we now are in North America and we have to fight our own battles. So our mission field is going across the street and witnessing to our neighbors. And if they're Pakistanis or if they're Indonesian, that's cross-cultural missions. So the missional church now is being the church itself is a missionary. So you'll hear this preached all the time. I don't know, Sam, you say this, but everyone's a missionary. You're a missionary, I'm a missionary. So go out and do missions. Okay, so on the surface, it sounds really good. And I agree. I'm happy that people are far more evangelistic at home, but what it actually has done, it's actually killing the mission sending movement of the past. The Hudson Taylors, the J. Christy Wilsons of the past. And in the end, if you're not sending missionaries, you don't have a picture of a sacrificial life, of the example of the gospel where Jesus, from heaven coming down on earth. That's a gospel message. We hear that and we see that in the scriptures, we see that in church history. But let's just say 50 years from now, and the American church will no longer send out any more missionaries. They will never see a life. Okay, maybe you might cross the street and get hit by a car, but that's not a sacrificial life. Anyone can get hit by a car. You don't see the gospel actually lived out by a few people by going into a place and literally dying. So that's why I think Joyce Lin, you've probably been doing that right now.
Well, let me introduce that a little bit because I think that's a good segue. First of all, you did serve as a college pastor and an English pastor at a Chinese Bible Lexington Chinese Bible Church. Am I getting that right? And
Greater Boston in Lexington.
Yes. And one of your students was a college student from MIT by the name of Eric Ding, which a lot of people a number of people in our church know. And he was a unique MIT college student, and he's very gifted, as he still is today. And the story, I've heard this many times, laughed many times about it, but where one of your other students was a woman by the name of May. I don't know her last maiden name. May.
Oh, we knew her as May Ho. Yeah.
May Ho. And she was someone that you and Jackie were really, caring for as much as the other college students. And she basically called one day, was talking to Jackie, and then she had shared that she's dating somebody, and Jackie said, "Dave, you'll never guess. May's dating somebody." And you said, "What did you say?"
Well, first, I think Jackie also said it first, but she called me I think I was upstairs, said, "Dave, you gotta hear this. Guess who's May dating?" And I was like, "It better not be Eric Ding."
And there's a whole story which we can't go into anyway, as to why you put it that way.
I know all of them very well. Of course, we knew Eric when Eric was before he was married to May, and I could tell you Eric has matured a lot since those days. But May was the normal one, and but Eric and May, just imagine those days. They were just, of course. Eric was on fire for God, but he was a unique character. And that's what interesting thing is. We had about 70, 80 of these college students, and Eric was one of the most passionate guys for God and for the Bible, and one of the hardest to work with. But in the end, God sent someone like him, and and thank goodness he had May beside him, because it would have been. It was that they were both called to go together.
Yes. Well, that time you had a number of students like Eric, and God and Eric and May, they went overseas. They did. You had another student also from MIT named Joyce Lin, and we just heard last week, I believe, the tragic news that as a missionary aviation pilot, she crashed and she lost her life. She's with the Lord, right? Do you mind sharing a little bit about that and just telling her story? And
yes. So, well, Joyce actually and her sister were both part of our MIT. We called it the CBF, Chinese Bible Fellowship MIT, and so there was about maybe 40, 50 of these very on fire for God. They really, loved the Lord, and they studied the Bible, and they really were. Now, Joyce was part of our, not everyone came to our intercollegiate fellowship on Friday night with all the campuses, And so, so Joyce rarely came to Friday night, whereas her sister, Amy, was very active in our Friday night fellowship. Of course, Joyce was more active on the campus. And that's what's interesting thing is sometimes we thought the committed ones are not necessarily the ones that I don't know how to explain this. I feel like the goody two-shoe guys that are always very committed to coming are the ones that usually stay in church. In the long run, we need those people to be godly Christians who are committed to the Lord. But the ones who actually God calls to go out actually are a little different in I don't know how to explain it, but what Jackie and I, when we arrived on the mission field and we attended the first OMF conference, and we looked who else were missionaries there, and we looked at ourselves and said, "Oh, we like them." I mean, it's kind of like maybe Sam, you.
Uh-oh. Sorry, everyone. It looks like we lost Dave. He will be back. Let me see. It's one of the challenges of being trying to communicate overseas. So does anybody have any questions thus far? Any thoughts? Good to see you, May. And Eric, I'm sure he's right there. I hope you, as you go back down memory lane with Dave. Dave is, it's good to know that he is still the same, don't you think? And he loves the Lord. He loves laughing. He loves being with people. And he is coming back really soon. So hang tight, everyone. Eric, I believe you will definitely get that equal airtime. I think what should happen is that maybe the two of you should be on together at the exact same time. I think that would be very interesting. Sorry, everyone. Dave is having some internet problems. He's asked us to hold on, so hang tight. And maybe the connection in Taiwan is really rough. Right now in Taiwan, it is 11:41 a.m. So the good thing is that it's not super early or late there. Everything's, I guess maybe everyone's on Zoom at the same time. It's actually 11:41 on Saturday. And so hopefully he'll be on really soon. So hang tight. Anna asked if Sue and I have ever considered going on the mission field. The answer to that is yes. And I'll explain more later. He's coming back on. Sorry to leave you with just that one answer, Anna, but I'll explain sometime later. Here he comes. All right, Dave.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. You were saying that when you were looking around, you would say, wow, all the different people who are going on the mission field, they're so different. Is that what we look like?
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe Sam, you can tell me, but I guess we're an odd bunch. You know, we're not the normal kind of. There's something not quite right. Maybe it's like Asperger or some of that, but something about missionaries. God calls sometimes the odd guys. I bet you the Apostle Paul was probably pretty odd. I mean, he wrote really well, but I bet
he was a genius. I think he was a genius. So he's a little odd.
Yeah, I think he could have been an MIT student. I really think those guys are smart.
Oh, by the way, Dave, Eric said he wants equal time. And then and someone said Eric hacked in to stop you. You know those MIT guys, they're always trying to hack in, especially once they're being talked about.
So anyways, but the interesting thing is God uses the interesting ones, you know. I mean, like it's the anyway. So
That,
I
you know,
would
that
say,
includes yourself, Dave.
yeah, no, that's what I'm trying to say. I look at myself, say maybe I'm not smart like Eric and those MIT. You know, I don't have that kind of brain, but definitely maybe I do have. Anyway, so I would say Joyce is
Maybe you do.
so so Joyce is like Eric and like our Jackie and myself. We're just not. We got a little of the yeah. So Joyce, I would say, is different than the norm, and but God actually, what she did was she
Mhm.
you know she. I talked to her sister about. I just emailed her sister. I said, you know, what was different about her and so on. Actually, she didn't have a strong calling in the beginning of missions. You know, she actually, when she went to seminary, I remember talking to afterwards, because she came to me. I think this was in the lobby of our church, and because she was either going to go to Gordon-Conwell or was in Gordon-Conwell, and I think she was just wondering what she was going to do in life. This is sort
Mhm.
of many years ago, so but my impression was when I was talking with her, she wanted to talk to me about missions because I had come back from the mission field. I either was speaking or I was on furlough or whatever.
Mhm.
And so she just wanted to know about it. It wasn't like she wasn't part of actually the group. Because when I was pastoring,
Mhm.
uh, Eric and May were part of that. And we had actually quite a few people who actually headed to the mission field from that group. But Joyce actually was only part of the campus ministry. She came to our church maybe for 1 year, but then she went to CCSC. Actually, she was more
Mm.
influenced by Sung Chan, and
Mm.
Sung Chan's not into, Sung Chan's more into social justice kind of thing. So,
Yes. Uh-huh.
you know, he's the angry Asian man who's fighting against all the whites. Anyway,
He's a friend of ours. Yes.
so we're all good buddies, so we can joke about it.
Yes.
Anyway, so she was more in CCFC. So I
Uh-huh.
would say she didn't get the David Jackie Rowe kind of
Uh-huh.
like, you don't go to missions, you're second rate kind of.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we
Yes.
really made missions like the
Yes.
main thing.
Uh-huh.
Although, and I think she later on in life, she just said, she got her pilot license because she was interested in flying. That I wouldn't.
Mm.
It was first story. It wasn't like she went and got a pilot license to be a missionary. She already had the interest. She was, of course, MIT grad, so she had IT. She was a cyber security person, so she had the gifting of IT. She loved flying, and she just said, Googled one day and said, "What don't what? How could God use me?" And she found MAF.
Mhm.
So it was more of God used her interest, and then she said,
Mm.
"Okay, what can I do for God?" And then made the decision to leave the comfortable life and go to serve God
Mm.
over there.
Mm.
So and so this is where Jackie's really good. It's good to always have a wife. Said, because I was like, oh, Jackie's like, had nothing to do with our ministry. Actually, God really touched her on a separate path. That's nothing to
Mm.
do. Of course, God used us, whatever. But
Mhm.
really, it came out of her own God
Mm.
using her hearing gifts. And at some point,
Mm.
I'm sure she was inspired by Eric and May going
Mhm.
onto the mission field too, as well as us
Mhm.
going and seeing other
Mm.
people going. But really, God touched her in a special way,
Mm.
and then she also made that step.
Mm. Mm.
In fact, I
Yeah.
didn't even know that she joined MAF because I had already been in Taiwan by that time
Mhm.
when she had that decision.
Mm. Mm. I'm when I think about people like Eric and May, Joyce, MIT grads, graduating from some of the best schools in the country, and yet they're giving their lives to go overseas. And, it's very easy for the world, maybe parents, to say, oh, what a waste, what a waste of like the top tier education. But obviously, we think of someone like Jim Elliot, who his death, people ask that same question. And, the whole quote of Jim Elliot, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And so whether you're talking about Joyce or Eric and May or others who are giving their lives for the sake of the gospel, or some of our Chinese brothers and sisters who are, even going to places like the Middle East, they are honoring the Lord, and they're not fools, to do that. In many ways, I think our world has more fools than, definitely more, in that sense.
Well, actually, Joyce will be actually do. Okay, so you look at Jesus's ministry. He only had 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
He could have had 30 years of ministry and then died on the cross, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a short ministry is actually a more effective ministry than a long ministry. Okay, and I don't. My prayer, of course, is I want a long ministry because I don't want to die in years. I want to die after. I wouldn't mind dying like Joyce after I've retired and then on my deathbed, maybe die on an airplane.
Your deathbed, die in your airplane. I don't think that's possible, but you're on your deathbed and you die in an airplane.
Oh. Well, I'm sleeping. But there's something about a short life that what happens is, this is what I think is God honor. And actually, when I came back from the mission field, and I got kicked out of China. I felt my career was over after. Of course, I had 9 years in China, and I was talking with Chuck Lowe. They was the pastor at the time. And he actually really ministered to me because he had been a missionary as well. He came back, of course, started pastoring church, and he said, Dave, some missionaries die in glory, kind of like Jim Elliot and whatever. Some missionaries actually come back and able to continue their ministry. Some missionaries go and just back into civilian life and start to work. He says, but God uses us all differently. But he said, most importantly, Dave, is that the missionaries that went out, you guys gave the best years of your life. You gave your life to missions while you could, and God honors that. Whatever the results, are up to God, and some go, like Joyce. And now as I look back, I probably prefer not to do it that way, but some are, and the results are. But if God had chosen that for our life too, we would have just gladly accepted it in the end. It's kind of like Jesus, in Gethsemane, the cup of suffering. He said, not my will, but your will be done. Even though he didn't want it in his own will, because he wanted a life of. I'm sure Jesus also wanted to live out his life so he could serve, the people, but he realized that the Father had a greater plan, and he submitted that to the Lord. And that's, I think, the life of a missionary in the end. So I think Joyce will be honored by actually many people, and her life will be. In fact, she'll be far more famous than Eric and me. I mean, she's on CNN, she's on Fox. I mean, the whole world knows about her now. And I think in church history, and at least the Chinese American or even American churches in Taiwan right now, Good TV just did something so the Taiwan churches all know about her. So she will be honored, and I really believe she needs to be honored in that way. But God will use that to catalyze possibly another generation of missionaries. But there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of missionaries who are serving in a field that are no name.
Right. Yes.
And they have no honor, no glory, and it's hard. It's difficult. It's not easy.
Yes.
And God uses them in that way. And in the end, God glorifies them just as much, and by having, in fact, no name missionaries in some sense in the end may get more glory in heaven.
Right.
That's the case we see in Scripture.
No, that's really good. Do you think so thinking about not just missions or just the church in China, but the church in Asia in particular, so anywhere from the Far Eastern countries of China, Korea, South, North, Japan, and then you have all the Southeast Asian countries, and including some of the, there are some big Muslim populations in Indonesia, Malaysia. What do you see for the next, I don't know, for as long as the next 25, 20 years? What is the church going to look like in Asia? Because Interestingly enough, Asia right now is very much in the news geopolitically, right? You have um, everything that's happening in China, just the back and forth between the US and China. There's a lot of threats from China to Taiwan. There's everything that's happening in Hong Kong. And then you have some of the challenges of some strife between Japan and South Korea, then everything that's happening in North Korea. There's a lot that's going on right there in this hotspot, especially with the coronavirus going on. And still, it's such a unique, I mean, not unique, but it's definitely a volatile time in terms of geopolitically. What does it look like for the church in Asia as a whole? What do you think?
Right. So you're right, Sam. What you pointed out is geopolitically and in the news, the next 20, 30 years hotspot is no longer the Middle East. Okay, it's going to be in East Asia, and it's going to be primarily between two major clashes of civilization. It's China versus the West, and it's playing out in Hong Kong and Taiwan. And the global conflict, the next major conflict is going to be over Taiwan. Hong Kong and Taiwan are going to be the hot. You're going to see more every day. You'll see an article, whether it's Trump saying something, Pompeo saying something, sorry, or President Xi or whatever, but it's going to be related to one of those three, and then North Korea as well. In fact, whether the North Korea president is still alive is still a question mark by some people, and if something happens to him, that is going to be a huge case. And then South Korea as well, what's happening in South Korea. So whenever there's a hotspot taking place, it's interesting. There's always some kind of spiritual activity that God's going to do and is doing in preparation for it. So it's usually the church is in some kind of transition. It's not sort of the norm thing. And so for Taiwan, it's very interesting. Taiwan in the last 12 years has doubled its Christian population. Over 800,000 people from Buddhism have converted to Christianity.
Wow.
In the last 12 years, just in Taiwan alone. No one knows.
That's amazing.
I mean, this is
and you've been there for a long time, and also your dad was a missionary there,
right?
So you know the spiritual climate there. Yeah,
I remember when it was Christian, it was like 1% to 2%, right? I remember walking out and everyone's a Buddhist, and if you found a Christian, like, whoa, you're an anomaly, you're like, wow, kind of thing. I went to Taiwan Chinese school up to 6th grade. None of my classmates were Christians. It was just like, everyone was Buddhist. It's a Buddhist country and so on. And the missionaries, my parents came, 40 years ago. And the missionaries that came and laid down their lives to Taiwan, the fruit now is taking place now, right? So the churches are growing, and now it's slow growth, but it's steady, slow growth. And so it used to be 1-2%, now it's 7%, right? So 1.5 million Christians now, and every year, is about 80,000 people coming to church now, conversion. Wow. So it's just going to continue to grow. So it may hit 10% one day, in the next 20 years, and once it hits 10%. That's like a tipping point. That's what I think Tim Keller said in the city. Once you hit a 10%, that's what happened with the Roman Empire. When Constantine converted, it wasn't like everyone was a Christian and became Christianized. It was only 10%, but the 10% mark kind of changed society in general. And I think that's what's going to happen in Taiwan. Hong Kong is already, in some sense, in the upper tier. Hong Kong and Singapore about 10 to 15% already in the upper tier, but it hasn't reached onto the lower tiers and so on. In China, it's about 7% as well. So we always used to think these places were mission fields, but in reality, there's a very active spiritual movement taking place in these mega in our region. Of course, Korea is about 30% Christian. But the thing about Korea, Korea is more like North America, starting to decline. People, I think the younger generation's only 3% going to church now. They may even be, they're called post-Christian kind of Christians now. So Korea is in a spiritual decline, while there's this spiritual growth taking place in especially in Taiwan and in China. Now, what's that going to look like in all of Asia? I think what God does often, he does things in waves, and you see how it hits a region.
With revival movements. Yeah.
Right. It wasn't just America, it was the UK as well. And it's kind of like things kind of, they infect each other. There's a movement that kind of infects. And so God is definitely doing something in China. And that's spilling over in all the other Chinese countries. Chinese, like in Taiwan and Hong Kong and Singapore, and even North America. The Chinese churches in North America are actually growing, right? And it's because God's doing something, just like the Korean churches in North America, it grew. When we were at seminary, it was like 30, Korean students, and all the seminaries had all these Korean students. It's because God was doing something in Korea, right? And so you guys, Koreans, moved into North America, planted churches, went to seminaries, and so there's a movement going on. Well, God's doing that all across China, Chinese all around the world, and Chinese, of course, are all around the world.
Yes.
But then China impacts Asia.
Yes. China
does have an impact over it now, not geopolitically, but spiritually. So in the year 2023, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to actually begin an Asia Urbana conference somewhere in East Asia of thousands of students. But I'm going to try to bring in, I hope there's no spies here. So Sam, keep an eye on right now who's watching here. But it's a joke. But anyways, there's some truth to the fact that that someone's watching. Anyways, what I was trying to say is, what God is doing among young people in the churches of China, we're going to eventually spill over to the churches in Asia. So Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, they're already sending out missionaries, but they've been at about 500, 600, 700 sending for the last 20 years. They haven't, but China is already sending 1,500 missionaries, and it's going to grow to about 20,000 in the next 10 years or so, next 10, 15 years. That momentum is going to then spill over. And hopefully we can see a East Asia kind of mission movement of other churches. Now, if churches in Taiwan are actually behind the churches in mainland China in mission sending. So I think mainland China will have a voice in challenging the other countries to be engaged in mission sending. And what happened is then the West will, because the West already, did we talk about the missional church already? I think I did already. The missional
Yes.
Like one thing that Tianming, when we were at Tim Keller's church for a month, he said Tim Keller is very deep theologically, gospel-centered ministry. How can a gospel-centered church not send out missionaries? That's not gospel-centered. There's something not gospel-centered about a church that's not sending out missionaries. Okay, so that takes someone from China to be able to see those kind of eyes, because most of us in North America, well, Tim Keller is the ideal pastors, reaching their gospel-centered ministry is, their mission is New York City, right? But they will have an impact on New York City, but there's no one in Redeemer Church that's laid down their lives to go to North Korea or to the Middle East, because they don't have examples of that in their church. So you actually lose a centerpiece of the gospel, at least in your church. You have Eric and May Ho, Eric Ding and May Ho, Eric and May Ding, because I remember May as May Ho. So but Eric and May as examples, they could have had a life of luxury in the Bay Area, like everyone else, of living in nice homes, but they gave that up and went to southern China and lived in a very difficult area for the sake of the gospel. You actually have a picture of the gospel of people from your congregation who have done that. So when you preach the gospel, you not just preach the gospel message about Jesus, and you can use historical examples, but you have people in your church who actually done that. Imagine North America churches and Asian churches that don't have that example. You actually that's not gospel centered. You actually have lost a center of the gospel. So I think what the church in China will do is remind the Asian church that we need to be part of sending the gospel. In the past, the West Americans and the Europeans and the British sent missionaries to us. Now it's our job to send out missionaries to other each area of the world.
Dave, on that note, we'll end it, but that is a great and really important call, and a call to conviction. So can I pray for you?
Sure.
Let me just pray for you. Father, thank you for my dear brother, Dave Rowe. Thank you for the ways that you're using him, that you have been with he and Jackie, their family thus far, as you continue to use him for the purpose of the gospel going forth to different parts of Asia and to the ends of the earth. I pray that you would sustain them, strengthen them. May they not grow weary in doing well. May you continue to empower them. Continue to give Dave many visions of yourself and real understanding of what it means to follow Jesus above all else. So thank you that you have used him. Continue to keep, if it be your will, that you would keep him safe, that the time that you call him home, it would be very clear, and it will be a time where, yeah, I know that you will call him as a good and faithful servant. And so just really pray for blessings upon him and upon the church. And so we just thank you and praise you. We lift him up to you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks everybody for joining us. And it was good to be with you all. I hope you, I know I learned a lot, laughed, had a good time. See you next time.